All right. Hello, everyone. Welcome to Morbid Symptoms. I'm your host, Tara Van Dyke, and I'm very happy to shortly be joined with Alexander Mckay from the Marxist Engels Lenin Institute, and Laura Jones, who is a longtime housing campaigner and also campaigner for independent Scotland. So the topic today is the Your Party UK has had another hiccup, perhaps has self-aborted. We don't know. Some people are still keeping hope alive and are sure that they will persevere by hook or crook because fascism is coming and Corbyn and the Sultanistas are our only hope. Similar divide is playing out in the States and probably other countries as well. So before I bring up my guest, I'm going to introduce my extended metaphor for the Your Party. Is it a stillbirth or was it a hysterical pregnancy? And for those of you who don't know, a hysterical pregnancy is when someone thinks they're pregnant or so convinced that they're pregnant that their body actually starts looking like they're pregnant. So they'll start to get the belly. It can even happen to men. So there you go, trans ladies. Anyway, we're turning our attention tonight to the so-called Your Party, the latest attempt, I would say, to revive Corbynism or social democracy in the UK outside the labor machine. So it's been branded as a new, fresh start, a break from Starmer's hollowed out labor. But if we look closely, what we see isn't the birth of something new. I argue we see a stillbirth or maybe even hysterical pregnancy. Again, a morbid symptom, another morbid symptom of the left. So this metaphor is deliberate. And if anybody who's watching has had a stillbirth, I apologize. I mean it in the metaphorical sense. Um, Obviously. So a stillbirth means something has gone through the motions of development. It shows signs of life. It excites expectations, but then it arrives stillborn. So your party emerged with a massive online enthusiasm, as I recall. So tens of thousands signing up in hours after Zara Sultana broke with the Labour Party and announced that her and Jeremy Corbyn were going to be, the new face or the new left, old new left. I don't know. Maybe Alex and Laura can shed some light on that. So within a couple of weeks, what was it? 800,000 people registered their enthusiasm for this new political venture. Yet the embryo was malformed from the outset, I would argue. Instead of developing the organs of class politics, it's inherited the same congenital defects that plagued Corbynism the first time and plague the Labour Party still to this day, which we'll get into more later when we look at both the internal contradictions that have killed this in the womb, so to speak, as well as the external forces that make it an odd vehicle to pin all our hopes on, or even some of our hopes on. So Zara Sultana is launching an unauthorized membership drive, Corbyn and allies denouncing it as illegitimate. And then Sultana, suddenly, when it works for her, she knows perfectly well who a woman is and decries the old boys club or the sexist boys club. I guess she just assumed they're all men. Maybe she can clarify that later if she was misgendering them. But I digress. So, accusing them of sexism, legal disputes, and all kinds of things. A party at war with itself before it's even born, before it's even had its first party conference. And if you look at the ideological DNA, Zionism remains quite a problem. And I wanted to share a bit of Alexander's and Clarenberg's interview with Professor Miller yesterday. Basically, there's a lot of liberal Zionists, that's still a thing, in and around, especially the Corbyn wing or faction of that party, and also various state operatives and intelligence people and whatnot. So I'll encourage all of you to go check that out on Decline and Fall. And I will ask Alexander his thoughts on what Professor Miller brought to the table regarding the things that are causing problems beyond membership squabbles. Then, of course, good old Sultana, she's still with the trans women or woman, said that anybody who doesn't agree with that or isn't willing or really excited about foregrounding that has no place in your party. So your party with an asterisk. So there's a feeling, there's a vibe, there's a mailing list, but it has not made it to term. And I don't think it will make it to term. And if it does, it'll be some sort of, I don't know, undead, old wine, slightly younger bottle type of thing. Nothing new, certainly nothing that can rise to the occasion. So after we get through what happened and why, both the internal divisions and the broader political and economic climate, we'll want to get into what this tells us. Yeah. So what can we learn from this hysterical political party or stillbirth. So it's not just about your party or even just about British. There's a left in general. I think this is just one in a long line of morbid symptom that is telling those of us who belong to this thing called the left that what we've been doing isn't working. And perhaps there's things that we're cramming together that ought not to be, and that we'll keep on crashing on the same waves, the same rocks over and over again. Maybe one day we'll figure it out. But to help me dissect that, I'm going to bring on Laura and Alexander to the stage here. Alexander, welcome. Please just tell who you are and about your institute.
Well, thanks, Tara. I was delighted to join you for season 1, and here we are for season 2. I run a couple of YouTube channels. One is my own, which is Marx, Engels, Lenin Institute, dedicated to providing a Marxist analysis both of current affairs and carrying out a certain degree of political education, with now more emphasis on the political education side going forward, because a lot of the analysis of current events is going into the other project I'm part of, the Decline and Fall Show, which I co-present each week with the well-known independent journalist who writes for Grey Zone and The Cradle, Kip Clarenberg, currently exiled in Serbia due to British state repression, I think is the correct way of putting that. And that goes out 1 or 2 times a week, though we have a series of very interesting specials coming up there, which I'll shamelessly plug. The overall aim of everything that I do is to try and make clear to people like exactly what they are dealing with when it comes to especially being a communist in an imperialist power. So that applies to Britain, that applies to the United States, the G7 nations, because I think what we're going to be talking about tonight is that so many people don't understand what they're dealing with. I think that your part is a very eloquent testimony to the fact that so many people don't understand the system that they're in and don't understand how to get out of it. And therefore, that's why they are stuck. I won't run too far ahead there.
Lord Jones, Miss Jones. It's a friend of mine. Anyway, hi, Laura. Oh, thanks for coming back. I'll let you also go ahead and say what you want to say about your activities. And I'm sure you'll mention the ongoing push to get women and kids out of mixed sex emergency housing.
Yes, obsession currently, and I'm going to have a Substack hopefully as of next week where I'm going to put up regular updates. Every time we meet with politicians, every time there's an event or new statistics come out, etc. I want to put it all up there so that people have somewhere that they can check. I'm currently trying to campaign to get a hell of a lot more women only, that is single sex, emergency homeless accommodation, because we've got a absolute spiraling situation with these hotels that people are being housed in. Used to be a desperate last resort temporary measure, but unfortunately has become the norm for people that when they apply as homeless to the council, they get stuck in these places for up to a year, and they're very, very dangerous for men and women, but particularly for women. And increasingly, there's lots of families with small children also in these. Okay, and I think it does tie in to the whole Corbyn debacle, because I don't think you can really talk about fighting fascism without mentioning the hotels, especially in this city, in Glasgow, where we've got a massive homelessness problem. And
we're going to get to that. We're going to get to that for sure. I just wanted to say that there's still a lot of denial. We got some pushback, at least on X, about the choice of the word postmortem. A few people came at me for that, like, it's not dead yet, and why are you saying that? Like, it's just a title for a podcast. Oh, I'm not like a medical examiner or something. You know, like, I can't be that clickbaity, but it was just kind of funny. Trying to push me, like, what do you mean? I'm like, watch and then come and tell me how bad I am, you know. There's still a lot of denial, even after this last debacle with the website membership and accusations of sexism. One thing is quite clear: there's at least 2 factions in what I would call a hysterical political party. The analogy to an hysterical pregnancy, you know, because I'm this whole morbid symptom thing I got going on here. But what I thought we would do is I played 2 short clips, one by Haas. He's affiliated with the Workers' Party, and he's big in the pro-Palestine movement. About a 1.5 minute clip, and then also about a minute clip from Laura's favorite person, Craig Murphy. Just kidding. We love Craig. Talking about your party. and then we'll get our response to that. So hopefully this works. I'm going to share my screen. We'll do Craig Murray on George Galloway first.
Has plummeted to the lowest level of public approval of any prime minister in British history, and taken Labour to its lowest share of the vote since it was founded more than a century ago. The centre cannot hold, can it, in United Kingdom politics? Something's going to break.
Yeah, well, I think two things are going to break. I mean, we know what happens from the destruction of the Liberal Party just over a century ago, when under the first past the post system, one party gets replaced by another. And it looks like we're going to see both the Labour and Conservative parties getting replaced as the main parties in a two-party system. First past the post will always tend towards a two-party system. It doesn't work well with multiple parties. And it results, when you have multiple parties, you get really EQ results, like the Labour Party getting such a massive majority on only about 32% of the vote. But this time, it looks like the Labour Party really is facing oblivion, and the Conservative Party much the same thing. And undoubtedly, Reform's going to do rather well, unfortunately, with their pandering to, if you like, the immigration concerns of the British people by pointing towards racism. And it looks as though your party may be well placed to fill in the gap, to become opposition on the left.
Okay, so now I'll play Hawes's clip, and then we'll come back and get your thoughts on if this is denial or bargaining. So this is DD geopolitics.
Did we cover everything you wanted to cover, Uncle Hawes?
Pretty much, yeah. Pretty much, yeah.
Chris, do you have anything?
The only question I have for our beloved uncle here is, how do you think the Workers' Party of Britain can help to shape the political landscape in the UK going forward? And what are your short-term, medium-term, and long-term goals for the Workers' Party of Britain?
So the Workers' Party of Britain, we've decided that we're going to join your party and help support it, because we have faith in Jeremy Corbyn as the leader of the left. He is the only natural leader. He was the leader of the opposition. He's got more of a mandate than Keir Starmer does. He had 12 million people that voted for him. Keir Starmer got in with 9 million people. So just to be absolutely clear, we didn't win the elections with Jeremy Corbyn last time because there was a combination of Conservatives with Irish MPs, DUP members of Parliament, that got the majority. So that is the reason why Jeremy didn't. I mean, he wasn't going to win anywhere, but we could have made a deal with the SNP. We could have done a deal with other parties as well. We could have done it with the Liberal Democrats, and we'd have been in a majority. But the Conservatives had 12 DUP that voted with them, and they got the government. I personally think that the only thing that matters is changing the landscape of the politics of the country before it runs away from itself. Why? Because the Labour Party has proven itself not to be a left party anymore. It's not even a centre-leaning party. It's now becoming a right-wing party. It's become the Conservative Party of 20 years ago or 10 years ago. The Conservatives are on the right-hand side of where they were 20 years ago. The Reform Party are even further right. So my biggest fear, and why I have not called Zara Sultana names, not called Jeremy names, and I keep trying to say to people, we as the Workers' Party would like to see the end of fascism in our society. And fascism at the moment, its face is the face of the Labour Party, and tomorrow it will become the Reform Party. These are fascists. They don't care about the poorest people in society. We're supposed to have a representative democracy where the people we vote for, who are our MPs, are supposed to reflect the will of the people. They get into power, and every single one of these people that gets in there, once they're in government, it's no longer their will. It's the will of the British establishment that has come before it, whether it's a Conservative Party or a Labour Party. It's whatever the will of that government or the British establishment that will tell, well, sorry, sir, but we've got to go do it this way. Sorry, sir, we've got to do it this way. And that is where the fault or the breakdown of democracy is. I know that if we have Jeremy win and become the leader of the left in this country, the way he's organizing it, which is this is going to be a community-led sort of from the bottom to the top policies and ways of creating communication with civil society. That's the best way for politics to go. It's also a place where socialism has a chance to grow, because we nearly got socialism in 2016 and 17. We were that far away from getting that.
Okay. So, Alex, comments? Let's start with Haas first. I have no problem with him, although I think he's living in kind of fantasy land, but, maybe I am.
I've got no problem with him because I've never met him, but I do completely and utterly disagree with him, which doesn't mean I find the man himself disagreeable, but let's roll with this. To say that you were within striking distance of socialism in 2017 is utter nonsense, though. I mean, I don't think he believes that himself, because he said prior to that a party gets in and it gets told what to do with the British establishment. So look, I was in the Labour Party from the end of 2015 until middle of 2018. That was long enough. And Jeremy Corbyn, the description that Haas there gives of Jeremy Corbyn as this great figure that led this heroic charge for socialism, I'd like to know what he was watching. Because if he was in the Labour Party at the time, I'd like to know if it was the same Labour Party I was in. Because what I witnessed, when what I talked about most recently with Professor David Miller, that you mentioned earlier, is a series of completely cowardly, useless capitulations. Every chance that Corbyn had to actually go against the British establishment, he turned in the other direction every single time. Every chance he had to mobilize people in a serious way, he went in the other direction. Every chance he had to radicalize things, he went in the other direction. And all that did was take all the enthusiasm which he initially did have and drain it away. And that you add into that the complete nonsense of the anti-Semitism fakery stoked up by the British state and Zionist operatives. You add into that the confused mess over Brexit, the litany of very dubious people Corbyn chose to surround himself with, and you get a complete disaster. So I don't know what he was watching for those years, because it wasn't the Labour Party I was in. Even when Corbyn apparently got control of the machine, things got worse. So there's that. The second point I wanted to raise was this idea about, Jeremy's going to have a lovely democratic participatory structure. Well, so far, so bureaucratic. But I was part of things like the People's Assembly over a decade ago. I've been through things that politicians like Jeremy Corbyn like to go and speak at, which is these events which have a lot of people attending. A lot of people get up and make contributions. They're noted down, and then those who run the meeting go off and do what they were going to do anyway. That's the nature of the kind of Labourism that Corbyn represents. And I'll just conclude on this point. Labourism is what he still represents, because he's still a Labour man, even if he's been kicked out of the party. He represents a form of Labourism, which talks the language of democracy and consultation, but it is run really by the left bureaucrats of the TUC. Value, their own position over everything else, who certainly aren't really interested in listening to anybody, but they are interested in pretending to listen to people, which is what I think Corbyn's clique, or the clique that surrounds Corbyn, wants to deliver for your party. They want a conference that will look like it's all friendly and, modern and participatory. But the outcome will be decided beforehand. They'll have an outcome in mind. That's why they're saying it will happen in November, because they've already got the outcome. What is they'll let a load of leftists come into a room, they'll make speeches, they'll all feel really good about themselves, and go home, and St. Jeremy will say, this is what we're doing. They'll already have that document written. Trust me. I've been to enough union conferences to know when a leadership has already decided the outcome before it starts. With all respect to Haas, I've never met the guy, but I think what he's doing there is putting forward the idealized version of the Corbyn leadership, which means that if Galloway is leading the Workers' Party into your party, he's basically leading them in blind. they're talking about this in their private discussions, which I'm not privy to, the way they're talking about it publicly, they are misleading their own membership, because this is going to go precisely nowhere. And we can get into why later on.
Great, thank you. Laura, do you have anything you want to say in response?
I mean, living in Scotland is really weird because you've got this constant sort of dual, sometimes conflicting interests. So seeing Craig Murray in the same week that he was at the UN making a case for Scotland being a colony, a very powerful case for Scottish independence to be recognised internationally, should it obviously be passed democratically, to then go on arch unionist George Galloway's show and be talking about like this, the importance of an electoral alliance and stuff. It's just really strange. It would be nice, I think, to see some of the Scots that are interested in signing up actually talk about that and how that is a contentious issue. The idea of your party going into coalition with the SNP does not fill me with, it's not
Great feelings?
It's a neoliberal party. It's a right-wing party. It's a unionist party at the end of the day. It's completely captured. So no, I don't see that as something to particularly look forward to either.
Yeah, what caught my ear? This idea that we're this close to socialism, as if by voting in a somewhat or nominally socialist party is what means you're socialist. Well, I guess Venezuela attained perfect communism. So if we're able to get your party, somehow that magically makes it a socialist system. But okay. And I remember when participatory development became the big thing in the development sector and the World Bank started talking about voices of the poor. And now you had to have participatory development, and to help slum sanitation, we had to go and talk to the people in the slums and find out where they're going to the bathroom and all this stuff. And I remember asking once, well, has everyone ever studied what the World Bank's policy was before and after they had these participatory exercises? What gets changed and what doesn't? And I remember I was at some development conference, it might have been at the University of Bath, and it like stumped the person like, oh, well, yeah, that would be a really great project. And I'm thinking, yeah, wouldn't it? It's just so ridiculous. But anyway, I only mention that because there's people, both the Corbynista and the Sultanist wing, what I'm calling it now, that come from that kind of sector. Yeah, so the NGO sector, the development sector. So everything has to be inclusive and participatory, but the policies don't really ever change that much. And one last thing, maybe we'll come back to this later. We're getting this thing in the States that it's going to be fascism. And the Democrats say, you got to vote for us or it's fascism. And Trump, we already know they're going to say like the radical left wants to kill you. And if you don't vote for us, it's going to be fascism. And this mammoth battle to kind of make it seem like there's a bigger difference between these two sides than there are. And it seems that that's going to be the discourse in the UK as well, that we have to do this or else it's going to be fascism.
Well, I would argue that Corbyn is already teeing up his intentions with regard to that. Did a tweet today talking about the evils of reform and this needs to be fought and stuff like that. So I think what he's teeing up there is basically a coalition to stop fascism. That's basically where it's going, because we can run some tests on this, because we know the French left fell down this particular trap. In the last French parliamentary election, Mélenchon put together this sort of motley left coalition, including some outright reactionaries like François Hollande and the old French Parti Socialiste. But they combined together with Macron to stand against the fascist Jean-Marie Le Pen, despite the fact that Macron had been battering the French working class quite literally through the Gilets jaunes movement for many years, had been relentlessly attacking the French working class. And then the French working class is told by the left, well, now you have to do a tactical vote for these guys to stop the fascists. And what will be done here, I think, and what Starmer is already pivoting towards or trying to, and who knows, they might get rid of Starmer, bring in somebody a little bit more convincing before the election, is they're going to go with fascism is on the march. Look at reform. Look at Stephen Yaxley Lenin. Look at all the flags they're waving. Look at all the racists. And their aim will be to scare anybody who quite rightly doesn't want that into essentially voting either for the Labour Party or the Liberals. And what you'll see is a desperate attempt to resurrect the Labour Party's vote that way. And then that will put your party, if it even exists by that stage, in a bind, because what does St. Jeremy do? Does St. Jeremy stand everywhere and stand against Labour MPs and be accused of allowing
Oh, yeah.
as
Yeah.
the like Paul Mason are already claiming this is what it's all about? Being Farage, therefore helping Putin. I don't know, the Russian invasion of Kent. By the way, I've been to Kent. They're welcome to it. But the point is, the likes of Corbyn and those who surround him, if this party still exists, they will fall right into that trap. And this was a discussion I remember being around in the Labour Party in 2016, and then certainly after 2017, with people who called themselves Corbynites, saying, well, we need a coalition with the Lib Dems and the Green Party and the SNP, and there'll be this wonderful coming together of progressive forces and we'll lock out the fascists forever. These people don't understand what fascism is. They think it's just mean things that are said, or mean things that are tweeted, or Farage being racist, or Yaxley Lenin dancing about on stage like a sort of coke-addled monkey. But it's not that. It's the organized violence of the ruling class that is brought down on the working class to secure the rule of a capitalism which is being threatened by organized working class power. And we have to drift to more reactionary politics, but that doesn't mean it's fascism. And if you keep screaming it over and over again, that everything is fascism, people aren't going to listen to it. And the problem with this is we're going to be subjected to this very cynical operation over the next few years to try and shore up the votes of the Labour Party by claiming that Farage is going to institute, I don't know, the resurrection of Oswald Mosley or something. Don't get me wrong, Farage is a reactionary. But so is Keir Starmer. So is Kemi Badenoch, if she's still around. So is Ed Davey. So are the leaders of the Green Party. They've all done horrific things, or would do if they got the chance. The choice for people being attracted to, Corbyn maybe is still understandable. But look at the man's record and look at what he's obviously preparing for, which is if they survive, even if they do well, what he'll do is he'll sell out to do a coalition with the Labour Party. It'll drain all the energy out of it. So as people have basically run around what they think is an anti-Labour party, only to be told, now we've got to go in with Labour and the Liberals and the Greens and whoever else they can find to stop the fascists. All that's going to do is increase the popularity of reform. Because this is what's happened in places like France. You see the popularity of the really reactionary party go up and their image as rebels be enhanced because they can say, look at us, we've been subjected to an establishment stitch-up. And the left ties itself to the establishment, as Mélenchon and his crew very stupidly did in France.
Yeah, UK politics and American politics kind of echo a rhyme because it's the same thing that you have for a long time ever since Nader. Like people still blame Nader for George W. Bush winning the first time or Stein for Trump winning. So it's convenient. But I think Chris Hedges said that about Bernie Sanders that he didn't want to be a Ralph Nader. There was no way he was going to risk the Democrats not winning. And we talked about this before in season 1, the parallels between Bernie and, as Alexander likes to call him, St. Jeremy from Islington. But moving on to talk about the division between the Sultana camp and the Corbyn camp. So I didn't come up with the Sultanists. This person tweeted the other day after the last rigmarole over the membership over Sultana's team, sending out an email for people to sign up as members and donate money. And Juan Mac said he's your party, but in parentheses, a Sultanist. And it made me kind of think of where people say Communist Party. They'll say Communist Party, Marxist Leninist, or just Communist Party, which I guess means, figure out if we're Trotskyist or not. I'm sure. I just want to say that Juan Mac's profile pic is so perfect that I have to share it. So let's see if I can find that. Here is Juan Mac. And he has one of these masks on. I'm not sure. I'm not down with the mask lingo, but I'm having flashbacks of like Pulp Fiction. They say get the gimp and they open up her chest and this guy comes out with the thing. Anyway, so Juan Mac says nay agenda, but the gay agenda. And he's a he, him. So I thought, well, not a surprise that he was with the Sultanists. And so this is what inspired me to have this be the pick for Sultana's court. So you have her there, the light pink and the baby blue sari. And then you have various kind of androgynous or not so androgynous people having a good time. Juan Mac is there someplace in the back doing whatever it is that he does. And then I thought, well, compared to that, this is how I would imagine a typical Corbynist event, more austere, and the bureaucrats and the aparcheks there. And on the other side, you have the more, I don't know, maybe retired teachers and do-gooders. But besides miscommunication and, just disorganization, what do you think accounts for the splits that we're seeing come out in these, I would say, overreaction to miscommunications about membership drives and whatnot?
Well, just on the various factions here, they basically mirror some of the contradictions that always existed in the Labour Party, which is that the Labour Party for years was home to like the wokest woke lefts outside of certain Trotskyite organizations. But at the same time, it was always home to people, various MPs who were socially conservative, albeit quietly a lot of the time. Sultana's outburst a couple of weeks ago, where she said there's no place here for people with socially conservative views, said on stage perfectly with the most unfunny comedian on the BBC, and that's some competition to be in, Nish Kumar, who I will never understand where he came from or how he's got a career. But she said to him in the usual smug, self-satisfied fashion. That was a reference to one of the Muslim guys who won a seat based a lot on sort of split in a previously solid Labour vote towards candidates that stood on a pro-Palestine platform in the last general election. Muslim men who apparently seem to be men of certain socially conservative views who have been working with Corbyn in this parliamentary group that he's in. So they make up actually the bulk of the MP base that would nominally be in your party. So then Sultana comes along and says, oh, there's no room for you. So that's a phenomenally arrogant statement that rather reveals the sort of very top-down nature of her thinking, but also reveals the fact that like that contradiction in the Labour Party was never addressed. The Labour Party gets to play this game whereby on the one hand, it had not only people of socially conservative Muslim views in it, but also it had people like Lee Anderson in it. Lee Anderson became like a Twitter star and a GB News presenter. He was in the Tories for 5 minutes. Now he's in Reform. Very racist, very reactionary. But the Labour Party used to also be filled with people like that. A lot of them were trade union officials. So it reflects a certain contradiction within your party, which is essentially the same base as the Labour Party. You have, on the one hand, people who come up through local Labour parties who might be social conservatives, who sort of sit quietly and don't generally broadcast their views a lot. And the loud noise is made by the sort of wokest of the woke types doing endless posturing and waving trans flags. Or on the other hand, I remember this from the immigration question. I remember from 20 years ago, you had David Blunkett, anybody remembers him, saying, kick them out, we're being swamped, etc. We will take tough action. And on the other hand, you had people like supporting the official anti-racist organizations saying, we must stop the racists, whilst being part of a government that took inspiration directly from the racists. So this is all going to come back into your party because it is basically a recreation of a lot of aspects of the Labour Party. And it's a recreation of like all of its contradictions, which are now being much more openly expressed because your party doesn't have in place the very solid bureaucracy that the Labour Party does, which keeps the lid on all this stuff. And it only comes out when somebody in the press team decides they want to discredit them. They're all fighting over this out in the open. And I would say another key reason for this, and this is the deeper reason, is that to attempt to recreate post-World War II British social democracy in the context of a Britain as a diminishing late-stage imperialist power, which is largely deindustrialized, which is getting more deindustrialized all the time, which is run by a tiny clique in and around the city of London, and whose economic policies are almost all tailored to benefit that group, then how are you going to recreate a social democracy that was based on Britain being an industrialized country with, by the way, an empire it could still exploit? Because as we know from the studies done by people like Tony Norfield, a lot of the money for those reforms post-World War II came from hyper-exploiting colonized nations. Something, again, most of the British left doesn't want to talk about that. Nobody likes to know where the money comes from. So they're going to have to deal with that. They're going to have to deal with these questions, which is when they're asked, for instance, if they indeed last, where's the money coming from? What they're going to do is come up with some nonsense derived from like MMT or something like that. But they're not going to be able to reckon with the question of, well, how are you going to do all the things that you say you want to do, which is still largely the demands of what you said before, Tara, which is like left bureaucracy, petty bourgeois leftist NGO types, which is divorced from a productive base because Britain increasingly doesn't have one. So where's all this, how's all this going to be put into place? They can't really deal with any of those questions because, as I think it was a right winger who said that people like Sultana have done politics on easy mode for their entire career. They've cruised along on the backbenches saying, I want nice things for nice people. Well, now's the time when you have to answer questions, and I don't think any of them will be able to. And they won't be able to deal with these contradictions.
And I just want to read this Zara Sultana quote, and then I'll switch it over to Laura. There is no room for socially conservative views in the socialist left-wing party, period. We have to defend the rights, dignity, and life of everyone, and that means centering the most marginalized. If people don't have pro-trans, pro-migrant, anti-racist values, there are plenty of other political spaces you can enter, not this one. We have to have our values. We need to let people know what we stand for. Then we need to be going out to the country and saying, this is the vision of society that we want, etc. Now, centering the most marginalized, first you need more information. Like, why is it marginalized? Why is it not being centered? Obviously, sometimes you have to have discrimination, or else we can't do anything if we don't distinguish between A and B and 1 and 2 and up and down, etc., and so on. And then there's no room, which is an odd place to start a party, as in, there's no room for all you people. You can't just be tolerant. You have to be actively anti-racist, pro-trans, pro-migrant. It just seems an odd place to start. But Laura, do you have anything you want to add about what you make of this, how you read these internal divisions and the infighting that's been, for some reason, carried out online?
I'll put it really crudely, it just seems like a matter of ego and money to me. I think they both want to be in control of the funding. Like, I'd agree with Alex that largely the people that are flocking and joining or signing up do want some kind of vague return to social democracy. But aside from like really shallow soundbite stuff, I don't really know if that's being put forward by Corbyn or Sultana. Certainly when it comes to issues like housing, it's very vague sort of student politics-y stuff that they're coming out with. But that statement there, that reached like NGO speak, right? So, you know, it's very important to have the correct views. You know, there's no space for social conservatism. This is kind of like the united front thing again. We can't have, you know, any racism. We can't have any fascist leanings. But it's okay to have people who have supported various, you know, wars and foreign interventions. Okay to have people who back up fascist states in other countries. It's okay to support people who took us into wars that killed millions of people. That's all fine as long as nobody uses the wrong language. Is what it feels like. And I think this is the problem we have is this, you can't have a united front against fascism. You're not stopping the fascists from getting in. That NGO culture of everybody says the right words and makes the right noises, but ultimately just agrees with the status quo, and they're all funded by the government to say nice things about the government in the right language and to ensure that nothing ever really changes. So you can have a perfectly lovely progressive government like we did in Scotland. We had a government that said it loved refugees and, you know, that Scotland was an open and welcoming country that was shoving them in places where they were dying every year, hundreds of people dying. And they were directly responsible for that. So that was a direct result of their policies. But it's okay because at least they're not using racist language. And I think it's a class thing as well. It's like the shadier operatives that are, you know, funneling money to dodgy states or like artificially creating support for, what is it, Israel, Ukraine, what have you. Those are tolerated. The warmongers are tolerated. The people that are actually making millions out of the suffering of these vulnerable and marginalized individuals are tolerated. But what you can't tolerate is the kind of racism that appeals to working class people, i.e. the kind of racism that is offered to them by reform, the anti-migrant stuff, but it's an explanation for the things that people are seeing happening in society. It's a bad explanation, but it's an explanation. Whereas the left wants to say racism is bad, so vote for us. This is why one of the reasons I've been so annoyed with Craig Murray. I don't want to stick the bait into Craig Murray this week because he's done such great work, as I said, at the UN standing up for Scotland. But he was having a go at poor Sandy Peggy on Twitter a few weeks ago, saying that she's a terrible bigot and all this. And it's well, basically, you people are happy to take money from a lot of very dodgy types, as long as that social conservative working class don't get involved. I'm sorry, but you're going to actually have to deal with some working class people, and some of them have, you know, the wrong views, use the wrong language, but they do want an end to homelessness. A lot of them are very much against wars and foreign invasions, you know what I mean? But you're already saying, no, we don't want you. And at the end of the day, they don't have as much money. You know, these people are sucking up to their pals that work in NGOs, etc. And it's just a big circle jerk that prevents itself forever.